Good evening. I'd like to call the regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Finance of Monday, September 17, 2018 to order. First item on the agenda, as is typical, is public forum. Anybody wishing to address the board in public forum? With that being said, I do want to mention that for the second month, our colleague Ken Gammerman will not be with us this evening. He is recovering nicely. I met with him yesterday so that he can go over all his questions and concerns, so I have all those with me. His goal is to be back for our October meeting. Hopefully that will be the case, and it'll be great to have him back, our veteran member. So, but I do have questions and comments from him, so I will be putting those forward as the meeting goes on. Second item on the agenda, approve minutes of the special meeting minutes of August 17th, 2018. Do I hear a motion?
I'll move we accept the minutes.
Second.
Okay. Any comments? It's a pretty short one because it was executive session. So, and I think everybody who was invited was noted. So, all in favor? Aye.
I abstain.
And
I abstain.
Yes, Veronica, Kathy. And I did want to note that Jonathan and Mr. Gammerman were on conference on that. So it does say in the meeting minutes, it does say in favor, and it has Ailes, Beatty, Scanlon, but you guys were on the call, so ultimately you heard everything that went on. Okay, regular meeting minutes of August 20th, 2018. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Comments, corrections, revisions?
I have a revision.
Go ahead.
On section 3.1. There, let's see, the 1, 2, 3, 4, the sixth sentence, sixth paragraph down. Mr. Hoey explained that the town's consultant, Castlebose, I think it should be issued a final report last week. This is with regard to the turf field review that the town had hired Castlebose to conduct a survey or a study about the causes of the damage to the field.
Okay. I had one on page 4, right at the top. The first full paragraph. Miss Trudeau said the first time she looked at it for next year, she thought they were in good shape, but then she was notified of 3. So we should probably finish that at 3. I believe it was students. 3 outplacements. 3 outplacements. Yeah. And that you were hoping to have an updated tuition report for the next meeting. So I'm assuming we'll see that.
We'll talk about that.
We'll talk about that shortly. Okay. Moving on. I won't put words in your mouth then. Any other comments? Okay.
I thought
Go ahead, Ken.
I'm trying to find it. Hold on. I thought
Yeah.
Just a second here.
Actually, while you're looking,
No, I'm good.
I have one.
I had another also.
Okay. See, you wait long enough. We come up with page 6. There was a question that was asked about payments to A&M or AM Electric on the Baldwin Middle School, Jones and Cox project. And there was a comment. Ms. Malvesi said she would look into that. I don't know if it was looked into regarding the full budget amount for what AM Electric was owed. I believe that was for the that's for the electrical upgrade project, I think. But there was a budget amount, and the payments were close to being done. So I don't know if that.
I apologize. It did not.
Yeah, it was kind of tucked in the meeting minutes there, so it might get answered as we go through standing building. So, all right, Jeff.
Later on down that page, under the section that has the heading medical, it said Ms. Malavasi said that they had 1.47 million covered by catastrophic claims. So when you factor in the premium, it has a savings of $200,000. She had been projecting a $600,000 surplus this year, but after the Board of Education decision to transfer its contribution to medical, the surplus is $100,000. I think they took it from medical and put it into pension, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that's
Right.
right.
So
So instead of, okay, yeah.
It should
So
be
instead
as
of to
contrib-
medical, to pension from medical.
the Board of Education's decision to transfer its contribution to pension, the surplus is $100,000, or from medical to pension.
Okay.
It's probably to make it most clear.
Yep. Great.
Okay, now I
Got
know
it.
what I wanted to comment on.
Okay.
On the bottom of section 6, which is on page 7, we got to, item 6 was discuss and take possible action on end-of-year transfers to close out fiscal year 2017-18, and a motion was made and we voted on transferring $84,000. But then underneath that, there are 2 paragraphs, which I really don't want to read. They're quite long, but it talks about the undesignated fund balance and potential uses of monies in the fund balance. It refers to a policy. In paragraph 1, it says the policy approved by the boards refers to operating revenue. So I believe, I'm of the opinion that both of those paragraphs should not have been in that section, that's really should have gone into new business in light of the fact, especially given that it's on our agenda tonight to discuss this very thing. And it was mentioned as being a conversation, informational purposes only. Ms. Malvasi explained that this is for informational purposes only, and here we are tonight talking about it again. We really haven't discussed it, so again, to me, that's all new business. I don't know that I'm in favor of, I'd like to know what the policy that's mentioned in there should be specifically referred to. It says the policy approved by the boards. I think it should indicate exactly where that is located and what that policy is and which boards it's referring to. Especially again, given that it's something we're going to discuss tonight.
Okay.
So I think I think there's been a big jump from that to this, and where that's located is in the wrong place, in my opinion.
Well, I believe it's there largely just because it came.
Well, that was
at
at the
that-
time.
just the timing.
I agree, but I was surprised to see it
Right.
come up so quickly.
I don't have any issue having it come up under new business.
We'll talk about it
discussion,
later
because we're going to be
tonight,
talking
but
about it as
it's-
part of our
exactly.
agenda tonight. To go to the policy when it was approved by the boards. Thankfully, our first selectman is here and other members of the Board of Finance during that time. I want to say that it was probably about 6 or 7 years ago when we had an unassigned, then it was, I think, undesignated, but now unassigned fund balance that was very low, that the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance basically created, back in that time, a policy that was to try to maintain to try to get up to a 5 to 10% undesignated or unassigned fund balance.
That's correct, Mike.
And the question is where that did that reside in meeting minutes? Did it reside? Is it actually
It's
written
a special
policy?
meeting.
There were actions taken by both boards. We can find the minutes to support that, to approve that policy. And that 5 to 10% policy was discussed at length during our rating calls with both the bond agencies that we had recently. And there's been substantial discussion on that over the years. That's the range that we would be comfortable in, 5 to 10%.
And it has been discussed, but I think it would be good to get that in writing, whether it's from meeting minutes or whatever, and find that just to make sure that it's
And I
covered.
recall people actually talking about a 10 to 15% range, and some of our comparable towns have 12-ish, 12.5, 13, 14. I don't believe that's stated in there as our target. I'm not sure I'm convinced that we said that 10 or 9.1. It was never really, there was never really a target. It was, yeah, I agree with you that years ago there was an intent to get to somewhere between 5 and 10. I don't know that it was a quote-unquote policy. I don't know that it's documented in anything you're going to pick up. I'm I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm sure you have discussed it with the rating agencies, because obviously it's something they care about.
What I'd like to do is just keep it on the meeting, we're on the meeting minutes right now. We're going to have.
Let's talk about it then.
We're going to have lots of discussion about this, later on. So I just want to keep it to, just approval of the meeting minutes. To go to your point, though, these two paragraphs.
Shouldn't have been.
Should be part of new business. That's your recommendation. I'm fine with that, to be putting under new business. It just is the matter of where it came up, and now we're going to be discussing it again tonight, so.
I don't disagree, but the problem is on the agenda, this is where the conversation took place, so moving it to new business it's really not how the meeting took place. That's what these minutes are for. It's a transcription of how the meeting took place.
It was a new business that took place under an agenda item.
Yeah.
So
do what you want with it. I'm just saying.
So
do what you want with it. I'm just pointing it out.
I'm fine with it. We're gonna put it to vote. So
it's evolving rapidly.
I'm perfectly fine with it. I just want to see if there was any. Is there anything else on the minutes? I don't think that there was anything else. All right. Therefore, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
I'm sorry. There was a motion. Do I hear all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
Abstain.
Abstain. Okay. Okay. That takes care of item 2. Item 3, correspondence. Number 1, Standing Building Committee minutes. I seem to have this running every month conflict. That's one thing or another. I was not able to attend this meeting. I believe we all did. We all received the minutes a little bit later. I think they were posted on Sunday, digitally on our board pack. I know, in fact, that Mr. Gammerman had gone through all the notes, and I hadn't seen any of them yet. So then they were posted later that day. So
I have a little more free time.
well, he also gets the packets in the mail right now. So I was not there, but I did have some comments and some questions, I guess, that were from Ken. Let me just go over them real quick. Some of the things that I am going to get answers on. I was not able to get a hold of, I was going to call Mr. Gurnham or Mr. Ornstein today. Under item number 15 on the performance contracting, and I'm bringing these up because these might be some questions that we all have. The mechanicals still need to be installed at Baldwin, and it's scheduled for next summer. I guess one of the questions Mr. Gammerman had is, was that planned that it's supposed to be next summer? I believe that there was some work that was moved to next year or next summer, but mechanicals are outstanding. I had a question on the soil that was excavated. It was indicated as tested negative, but then they had to do more. If it was negative, why did they have to do it? So,
But soil for what purpose? That was my question.
it's for PCBs, which is basically a state regulation that they have to monitor that. But if it came back negative, negative would be that it came back clean. So the only thing I could think of is that possibly it tested positive. I don't know. So that's a question I had. The turf field may come up tonight under old business. Maybe we could just ask the question now, but there was a conclusion that the drainage was not designed properly, which would, if that's the case, that would solely or a majority of that would fall on whoever the engineer or designer was. So I'm curious about where that stands with the turf field. Actually, we should probably ask for an update on that.
Sure. Your timing is perfect.
Okay.
Earlier today, our counsel, outside counsel, Jeff D'Onofrio, released the fact that the 5th contractor finally agreed to pre-litigation mediation. So that means everybody has agreed to go to mediation to try to resolve the issue and determine once and for all which parties are going to be paying for which parts of it. Jeff D'Onofrio circulated the name of 3 or 4 mediators in terms of folks that we're going to recommend for consideration as for mediation. So this is an attempt to avoid a protracted litigation by us presenting our facts to a mediator or a panel of mediators. I'm not, Jeff, you're probably more familiar with how that process worked. But nonetheless, this is an attempt to avoid a protracted litigation. So
That's good news.
it is good news.
Good news.
They've all agreed to that point. There are several of them have considerable, potentially considerable damage to their reputations. This and these mediations, I think, often result in non-disclosed contributions by the part of the parties to protect their reputations. So,
Yeah, and the concern that came up
at this point, the availability of the field for spring is still up and
Right.
is still highly questionable. Most likely, if I were a betting man, and I only bet on the 3 big horse races every year, and I don't do too well there either. But I would think that we're probably not going to have the field available for spring.
Yeah. That's a lot of work to repair it. So, okay. If there's any other questions, we could.
Be happy to entertain them.
Community center roof. There was a question regarding the sub that the contractor was trying to find who was needed to be Firestone certified. I guess one of my questions on that was why are they trying to find that certification now? Why didn't they do it before? I sound like Mr. Gammerman, don't I? I'm doing pretty good here. You had some really good questions. And then on the on-call A&E list, there was a surveyor that was added because I guess no civil engineer companies were selected as part of the 7. And I guess my question on that is, did they actually apply for it? My assumption is that yes, they were probably one of the 30 that applied. But and then the final one was at the last page on the motions of the payments. I don't know if you all caught this, but I believe there was a typo. And I just want to make sure it's clear that there was an application for payment 4A to Johnson Controls that was for $2,048,855. The way that read, it looked like it was $2,000. So just want to make sure that that was noted. Does anybody have anything else on the building committee?
Jim?
Yes, go ahead.
The center roof, since we're sitting under it.
Yes.
The contractor was not Armstrong certified. He accepted the bid.
Firestone. Yep. Okay.
He accepted the bid, knowing that that was a prerequisite. It was a condition of completion. He tried to weasel out of it up until the end.
Okay.
Standing building committee refused to rescind that, so he
Good
wound
for
up having to sub the job. Unfortunately, I don't know which door you walked in today, but there's a significantly nice piece of the hallway that has brand new carpeting in it. The whole hallway had carpeting in it up until last week. The contractor for the roof made the unfortunate decision to take off the flat or nearly flat roof just prior to the heavy rains last week. So if you look out the window from the other side, there's probably a bunch of tarps. We had significant leakage, and we already engaged Jeff D'Onofrio in terms of mitigation of the damages to the tile and potentially sheetrock and any other considerations. So
Okay.
we don't find ourselves in an adversarial role with the roofing contractor because
As long as they
he's
take
admitted
care of
in the
it.
letter that they're responsible for remediating any of the problems they caused by their untimely taking of the roof and not getting it covered in time.
So the Firestone certification was really nothing in
It
comparison.
pales in comparison to the real
To
issue.
what actually, yeah. Okay, but totally different. Totally two different things.
Right.
Anything else on building committee?
Item number 8, I just have a quick question that you probably know the answer to, Michael. Ms. Plasiak, is that how you pronounce her name?
Plasiak, yeah.
Requested that a small civil engineering company be included in the on-call list, so Summerhill and Land Surveyors has been added to the list of possible vendors. My understanding was that there was a deadline for being included on the on-call list, and then all those people submitted proposals and
Right.
were vetted.
Right.
Did this happen prior to the deadline? Because it looks bad from my perspective, optically, if somebody was given special treatment.
Correct.
Especially
And
given
that's
she's a
and
new
that's the
employee.
did they apply portion of what I was questioning is did they apply as part of the 30 that met that deadline? it could have been oversight that there was a firm that might have been selected or looked at as a shortlisted firm that didn't have civil, and they thought they did. So
All I'm saying
the
is, to me,
question
obviously, it looks bad.
you
And they
need
should
to-
wait another year if they didn't follow whatever the rules are.
Yeah, I mean,
to get in.
I would hope that they applied and it wasn't thrown, they weren't just added to the list. But that's a question I have as well. So
And how do
I
we
agree.
find out the answers to these?
Calling Mr. Gurnham, which I was not able to do today. So what I will do is on the questions that I brought up, I will follow up with Cliff tomorrow. And if I can't get hold of Cliff, I'll talk to Scott Ornstein. Because I had the same questions, I unfortunately just didn't get to them until reading them yesterday. So, okay, anything else? Moving on, correspondence, pension committee minutes. Anything on pension committee?
We received a number of replies to our request for proposal. We had a subcommittee review them all. We chose, in the end, 5 that we'd like to interview. We'll interview them on the 10th of October. With Mr. Gannerman in my ears, we're going to discuss the fees. We've received the fees proposals. And they're also different that we've already sent a letter out to them to ask them to itemize and give more detail about that. We do see scope to reduce the fees that we're already paying now. It's total up to about 40 basis points. Once this is done, we'll send out an RFP for actuarial services. We're with Milliman now, who are sort of the default for most municipalities, but we'll be checking, we'll be sending it, we'll be reviewing them along with everybody else as well.
Thank you, Bob. And yes, Mr. Gammerman yesterday was asking the questions. I said, I'm sure it'll come out tomorrow about the process of that RFP. So thank you.
You're welcome.
If we had that question, you just answered it. So, is there anything else on pension committee? Okay. Moving on, item 4, review and accept report of expenditures for the Board of Education for August 2018. Linda Trudeau and Chairman Bloss. Welcome. You seem to be making it to every other.
Well,
yes.
so I shouldn't be here tonight, but Mr. Kazin, Gary Kazin, was actually the reviewer for last month, and he was unable to be here this evening, so he graciously volunteered me to be here, so I'm able to report both on the expenditures for the month of August, but also the opening of school, which we have done, and I'll be glad to give you some updates on that. But
excellent, thank you.
our expenditures for the month of August were $4,615,877.82. Really nothing particularly unusual. Obviously, it's the first month of salaries. There was a salary a payroll in August this year. There isn't in every year, just depending on when school starts. And we also have decided to break up our HSA payments into, depending on the unit, the bargaining unit, a couple of different sections. So that's lower, but it's going to be the same for the year. So there's nothing particularly unusual about the expenditures. I'm sure you looked at the warrants, and on the first page of the warrants there are some a sizable number of emergency HVAC repairs. It was hot. It was hot in the end of August, and it was something that we had to get done. The GHS, the high school repair, is a little bit unusual in that we have a pretty high level of confidence that the high school was actually hit by lightning this summer, and actually was hit on one of the HVAC units on the roof and scrambled it pretty thoroughly, but it's been able to be fixed, and we're hopeful about it.
Yeah, that was in the meeting. I read that in the meeting minutes about the lightning strike. Did they determine that it was actual, or they just couldn't tell from?
That's the last information that we got.
Yeah.
That because of the damage to some of the internal circuitry, there really isn't another way that could happen. It wouldn't happen from just a short circuit or something along those lines. So, and the Lakes and Lathrop House and they're getting to be older buildings, and we're just going to have to take care of them as best we can. They're in pretty good shape. They were in pretty good shape for the start of the year. I know there were some rooms and some wings of some of the schools that were not as comfortable as we'd like them to be. but they have been repaired, and with the onset of cooler weather, we think that we're going to be in good shape on that. There are a lot of, you'll notice, tuition payments, in other words, payments for outplacements. Those are going to be initial payments for children that have been ordered to be placed in a facility outside the Guilford schools under a special education, individualized education program. So that is just the start of something that obviously we do pay a lot of attention to and do spend a lot of money on over the years. I don't know if there are any other questions on individual warrants, and I'll do my best. Mr.
Yeah.
Doe may be able to help a little more.
Yeah, there was a question Mr. Gammon had on one of the warrants, but just because you mentioned both of those, I was keeping on that. So the upkeep of buildings and grounds where the encumbrances are incredibly high, at 482. Now, I know typically there's encumbrances on upkeep of building and grounds to get repair work or whatever maintenance has to be put to order. But it's, if I saw this correctly, 69% expended, I guess. Was that, those encumbrances, did that have to do with the emergency repairs, or where did the emergency repairs fall in? Did that come in capital? Where was the monies that were going to be used for the emergency repairs in the HVAC that you just mentioned? Is that upkeep?
Yeah, that's upkeep
Right.
in buildings.
And that's
grounds.
actually not a staggering amount of money, frankly. I mean, one thing I think you should know, that we have been able to complete the repair of the lead septic field. That
Right.
was a potentially a really scary thing, but it's been resolved, and it actually wound up not being quite as expensive as we thought it was going to be. So, but it raises the other question. You know, LEAT is about the same age as lots of schools in the district, and so we need to make sure that the fields and some of these other schools are in decent shape as well. So we're working on making sure those are inspected and those are in good shape.
Okay. So the encumbrance on that line item is not abnormal, number one. But
No.
number
Not
two,
abnormal.
what you just mentioned, that's where, maybe there was more than usual because of the amount of work that had to get done over
Well,
the
that
summer.
particular line item, you try to jam as much as you can into the summer,
Early on.
and the fact is that in the end of the 18-19 fiscal year, there's only going to be, 1 or 2 weeks.
Right.
So you really, we try to jam everything into
I
as
thought it
much
was
as we
typical.
can into
Yep.
July and August.
Okay.
There's a lot of encumbrances in there for testing that needs to be done throughout the year. The well water monitoring, septic testing, system testing from the elevators to all kinds of building requirements that we have to do throughout the year. So Cliff does purchase orders up front for all these things that are going to occur during the year that he knows of. So it kind of just sets him up so that everything's covered throughout the year.
Right.
And is that similar to why we have the encumbrances on site improvements as well?
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
And then on the summer tuition that you mentioned, or the tuition payments that
Right.
started, one of the questions Mr. Gammerman had was on the summer tuition. What's the amount of students that are going through the summer, going through the summer programs? I mean, we have
Well,
so many.
Title I programs or special ed programs?
Well, how much of the what's the percentage of summer tuition that's just for the summer tuition versus for the entire regular?
So the summer tuition that appears on the warrant,
Yeah.
if you're talking just a summer program that runs July partly into August, it's maybe about a third of our students. But we do have some programs that run year-round.
Right.
So there are some students that their tuition is just ongoing all year round.
Right, that makes sense.
That
But
would be a
there's
few
about a
more.
third
About
of
a
the
third
students that go through.
of the
Okay.
outplacements are
Okay,
attending a summer program.
okay.
And also, I'm sorry, go ahead. And also, some of the schools bill at different times of the year, right? So you may
Yes.
get an invoice that's payable in the summer that was for April through June, right? Or not really?
Not really. Most of the schools, we try and get anything that's billed, that's first tuition through June by the end of July, so that it could be charged to the appropriate fiscal year. We do get bills in July and August that are for the entire year. Some bill in quarterly installments, some bill in 1/10. So all the payments vary depending on the structure of the schools.
Go ahead.
Do you have that little sheet that you often give us that talks about the number of people in placed and outplaced?
I do not.
Because I was just going to ask if we could talk about, that usually comes up later. So.
Right, my plan was to have one, but our pupil service director has left us. So we moved up the acting director, Jason Scanziano, or the assistant director to acting director, until we can hire somebody. And because he's in that transition, we haven't gone through the tuition enough that I felt comfortable handing out a report. The Board of Education
We're planning
didn't.
on getting that next month. And
You get it next month.
But, so generally speaking, though, I think this was the year, I could be a year early now, but we had anticipated that a number of people would age out of the program
some are aging out.
Right.
this year.
Correct.
But then I think you suggested several months ago that some new people may have come in that we weren't expecting.
So when we ended,
So where are we
when
sort
we
of,
ended
generally speaking?
end of the last fiscal year, we had added some outplacements.
After we'd adopted the budget.
After the budget was adopted. So even though, yes, we did have a number aging out, as we went through the end of last year, we added some new outplacements. So
And
We'll
we're
have-
flat to that?
I don't know. Probably not. We think that probably this is going to be another situation where we are potentially going to be overexpended in that outplacement line again. And that is, that is the single most vexing line in the budget, because it is so hard to plan. A variance in one child, one outplacement that we weren't budgeting for, can be $100,000. And we found out that the state, with at least some providers, the excess cost grant, where they're supposed to give us 100% of all amounts above, was it 4.5 times the regular per student cost. Well, the state unilaterally has said, okay, but we're going to cap that at a particular amount. So if you've got a particularly high needs child in a particularly specialized program, then you're not only paying the first 4.5 times regular, but you're paying 100% of everything above a particular number. And
So
we
how
didn't.
can the, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, if your question is how can they do that, because they.
No, well, my question is, they do that, but at the same time, they also rule against you when you lose, when you go to court to try to steer the person toward a solution that's less expensive. So it seems contradictory.
Well, it is not the most, it's a very difficult area, obviously, because, there are some quirks, though, in the rules that are really odd from a lawyer's point of view. If we have the burden of proving that the child that maybe has been unilaterally outplaced by the parents could benefit just as well by being in district, and that's not the way the rest of the world works, in terms of trying to prove a case. The person who's making the claim is usually the one proving the case, and we have to prove a negative in that situation, and how do you do that? Because the child has been unilaterally outplaced. And so there are some odd aspects of it, and some things that we would certainly like to see reviewed. CABE has made that proposal to put the burden of proof on the entity seeking the relief for several years now, and it just hasn't gone anywhere in the General Assembly. That is a pretty obvious area that really ought to be looked at. It ought to be more than looked at. But.
So bottom line, we should expect higher surprises on the high end.
It would not at all startle me to see outplacements at a higher level, partly because of the capping of the state excess cost grant, which this is the first year I've heard of it. Partly because of just new kids, and partly, well, that's really why. And I think, to be fair, I think that's right. Virginia Brown has left the district. She left it in August to take a job closer to home. She lives up at the Connecticut Rhode Island line, and it's just a very tough commute. And so there is going to be an interim period here where we don't have quite the level of management, or staffing anyway, in the management side that we would like. And now I'm not saying that that's leading to any changes in IEPs or anything like that. I just can't say that. But it helps to have an active, involved director, particularly in this area. So we'll see. Is the bottom line. And if it's like every other year of the past, several of the past years, we'll deal with it. That's the best we can do. It's the one, I know I keep saying the same thing whenever I'm here. We don't control that line. That line is controlled either by an IEP, which the Board of Ed is not represented on, and cost is not one of the factors. It's service. If the IEP is disputed, it goes to the State Department of Education for a mediation. If there's not an agreement there, it goes to a federal judge. The Board of Ed doesn't get a vote. So, but we're proud of the program. We're very comfortable with the way the program's working, the special ed program in general. But that is just one of these areas that, and we're not a tiny district. Some of these small districts, with $10 or $15 million budgets, they get 2 or 3 kids like this, and it's a major budgeting issue. But we'll deal with it.
I think looking at where we were 5-6 years ago, though, we could be sending more kids out.
Oh, no question.
As opposed to keeping them in-house. So as much as we're talking about this, it could be a lot worse.
And it
if
has
we didn't
been.
make decisions that we did several years ago. So
We'll deal with it.
Board of Ed did.
Yeah.
Have there been more incoming students since we had the ones who came in towards the end of last year? Or do you just don't know yet?
There were 3 mentioned last meeting, right? There were 3
Right.
outplacements and
3
added
potentials,
additional,
right. There's the 3 potential, and I don't even have cost for those 3 yet, which is part of the reason why I want to sit down with the
Right.
with
And you thought
Jason.
last month, you were going through that process last month, trying
Right.
to get the cost, so.
Right, so I still don't have all that information, so Jason Scanziano and I are trying to work through that and try and get some answers on some of these things that both of us just don't know right now.
I had a question.
Go ahead, Ron.
In the minutes, there was talk about the temporary OLM school that is here in Guilford. Is that impacting our transportation line item by having to provide
It's going
transportation?
to. We haven't got a bill yet. I don't think either the town or the Board of Ed has received a bill yet, but there is going to be a cost to that. And that's a good question. Just so people are aware, I think it's grade 4 through 8 is going to be temporarily housed in Guilford. Under state law, the town is required to provide transportation for those students that live in Guilford. In other words, if the private school facility is located in this town, we have to provide, somebody has to provide transportation. And so the problem is that they're a grade 4 through 8 school, at least in Guilford, and that's 2 different bus waves.
Yeah.
And the second bus wave, the middle school bus wave, there's just no way you can add kids to those waves. That wave is already just an impossible wave from a logistical point of view. So I think what the intention is that there's going to be a van specifically paid for just for OLM kids that live in Guilford. And there are not a lot of them, but that there's no alternative under state law. We are also, the town is required to pay for some part of nursing services.
Yeah.
And I don't know,
And special ed services.
Special ed.
and special ed as well.
Special ed.
Yeah, so no, it's and that all this happened in July or August, and
Yeah,
that was
because
after.
I was surprised when I read about it. I had no idea.
Yeah, no, it's something I don't think we were anticipating. It's certainly not something that was built into anybody's budget.
Yeah.
So I think we're talking to Madison to see how they've handled it in the past. We're talking to Brantford to see how they've handled it, with St. Mary's. So yeah, it's not. We're obviously it's great that they're here, but there is going to be an impact,
A financial impact
that nobody was anticipating. No one could have anticipated.
And I would think you'd have a problem rerouting the buses because depending on where the students live, how are they, and where the school is located, you couldn't really say, we'll pick you up on the Lakes bus, for
No,
example.
correct. You
couldn't-
might have
couldn't do that.
you might have a child in Sachem's Head,
Right.
who then the bus would go to Cox,
Right.
and that's not where the
That's not
OLM
what the
facility
school
is.
is,
So no, there's no alternative to hiring.
The 4-8 school is located at Soundview.
Right.
Yeah, there's no alternative to.
Yeah, if you're talking North Guilford, it's quite a distance.
And there's no offset from like the archdiocese or anything?
It's not an archdiocese school anymore.
It's not.
So,
Okay.
but the answer is under state law, it wouldn't be anyway. No, there's no. This is
So there's no offset from anyone? Okay.
No.
So-
This is a
Guilford
this is a
taxpayer.
town subsidy for, I mean, and again, I'm not going to be critical of it,
Yeah.
but it is a town subsidy for a private school. It would apply whether it was a religious school or anybody else. It applies to private schools.
So and is it K through 12? So any town that has a private school that's K through 12 who has residents who attend that school, then the town has to provide
does it apply to high school?
transportation?
I'm not sure.
I'm not positive about that, but I think it is. I think it applies to any private school. I'm not positive. We haven't looked at that. We don't need to.
So any resident gets transportation to a private school if they reside in the town?
Correct.
Wow, I didn't know
Now,
that.
how do these costs compare if they were to actually attend school? Isn't there really a theoretical savings?
No, not at all, because we wouldn't run a special bus just for those kids, first of all. And the bus is going to be expensive. That's going to be a $25,000,
Oh, it's going to be
more than that,
It's
more
gonna
like
be more than
$50,000 item,
It's over $200 a day for a van.
times
for-
180.
For the bid contract.
So,
For the amount of
and then
students, yeah.
and then adding 10 kids into the district at different grades, there's no marginal cost to that. I mean, because we're not going to hire a new teacher for 10 kids across 10 grades or 5 grades. So look, it is what it is. It's fine. The OLM provides a great education and a good service, and we're not going to be, we're going to be good neighbors to them, and we're going to work with them. But this is something that nobody budgeted for, and we just need to be honest about it. We don't have a choice. We do have to provide, as Ms. Scanlon said, we do have to provide special education services also for the facility. We're not anticipating that that's going to be very, very high, but again, we're in contact with Madison and Brantford to see what their experience has been.
Any other?
How about a question about warrants?
Go ahead.
All right, this is just our everyday expenses, but I've always been curious about the benefits we provide our administrators for cell phone service. And I just happened to catch my attention on page 7 of the warrants that there's actually 2 reimbursements for phone service. One says just phone and one says cell phone, and they're actually within about 10 days of each other.
I'm guessing one is Mr. Gurnham and one is Dr. Freeman.
Well, they're both for Dr. Freeman.
Yeah.
I was curious, why there'd be 2 phone reimbursements so close together. I thought it would just be maybe monthly.
So one is for the replacement of a phone, and then one is for the monthly plan fee.
Ah, okay. That's why there was 2 in one
That's why there
month.
was 2.
All right.
2 questions, one from me, one from Mr. Gammerman. It's from the meeting minutes, the elementary school enrollment. Numbers show that's declining. I know October 1st is the reporting date. Just curious on the declining, how much,
Yeah, so
how
once
much has it
again,
declined from?
just to remind you, we budgeted for a decline in 75 children.
Right.
As of now, it's not that big. It's 58, and we expect to get a couple of other, it wouldn't surprise us anyway, to have more enrollments through October 1st. The numbers are spread across all 13 grades, and so there really isn't a precipitous decline in any single grade. We did have a larger enrollment at Lakes than we anticipated, and we did add a kindergarten teacher at Lakes, but we did not make a new position. We moved somebody from another position. And then we did wind up hiring, as was in the budget, a new teacher at Leet to meet a bubble that we had in one of the classes there. The parents are very, very happy about that. But otherwise, we're about where we thought we were going to be. We're, again, not flat exactly, but pretty close. That's not, 58 kids over 13 grades is not going to lead to any staffing changes.
Bus routes.
We're working on it. It has been.
It's been
so-
quiet. Haven't read anything, so that's a good sign.
Well, so as the old person at the table, we went through this 10 years ago. I'd like to just remind everybody. I don't think anybody was on the
first couple weeks is always painful.
First couple of weeks was always
Always.
tricky. It was particularly tricky this time because we did change bus companies. And I just want to refresh everybody's recollection who wasn't around 10 years ago. It was just like this 10 years ago. And to refresh everybody's recollection, 2 years ago, it was just like this when we started to move toward cluster stops to try to make the stops more efficient. There have been some issues. Now, I think they're mostly getting worked out. One of the things that we just learned, the board just learned on Monday, is that our former vendor, our former bus company, was particularly uncooperative in the handoff, and they were not happy that they were not given the new contract. So all of the routes, all of the information, all of the software, all of the plans, they took, and they didn't give them to us. And that was, none of us have ever heard of that before. I went out on the the board chair listserv. That is not something that I've seen talked about anywhere. It's certainly something that we're going to build into contracts moving forward. But nobody thought that the old company would just refuse to cooperate, but they did. And so we literally had to construct every route by hand. Now using software, but without any basis of knowledge.
Starts fresh.
Yeah, had to start.
On a new software.
On a new software
from the
program.
previous company.
And a significant number of drivers went with the old company to wherever the old company was able to get a contract. So there were some challenges that we didn't anticipate. But I think the last couple of days anyway, I think most of the buses, I think almost all of the buses have been off the road by 4:30 at the very latest. That's less than 55 minutes from the end of the elementary school. So there have been some routes that have been certainly less than ideal. There have been some routes that have worked great. I mean, I've heard from several high school parents who say, thank you for, now the kids are waking up a half an hour later because we're not dropping them off so early, and the school is starting 15 minutes later. But so I think Mr. Bowden is meeting with them weekly to try to iron out issues with routes. There are going to be some routes that are changed. There's some routes that are probably too long right now, because it depends on who's riding. There's some routes that there are a lot of kids taking their cars. You see, when we plan the stops, we don't know who's going to drive themselves, who's a senior or junior who's going to drive themselves, who's a sophomore or a freshman at the high school, who mom or dad is going to drive, who from Adams is going to get dropped off at school. We don't know those things. And so you don't find that out until school's been in for a week or two. And so we're getting there. We're confident that it's going to be resolved. If we have to change some stops and routes, we're going to. If we have to add buses, as of today, I don't think we're going to have to. But if we do, we're going to. We're not going to have kids riding around on a bus for an hour and a half in the afternoon. That's just not part of the plan.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Food services. Marina, it looks like it's doing very, very well.
Yeah, that's just an understatement. Yeah, it is that has turned a corner. That program has turned a corner. The quality is up. The participation, maybe this shouldn't surprise people, but as the quality has gone up, the number of customers has gone up, and the revenue has gone up. That's kind of not a bad business model, but it has been a very good experience. Yeah, we're very happy with the director. The staff has been terrific. We're pretty comfortable with where we are right now.
In the meeting notes, there was a comment about an uncollectible amount.
Yeah.
For seniors. Could you explain why that would be uncollectible? How would that? Is it
just $1,200
uncollectible? $1,200.
Seniors, we never cut anybody off from serving them lunch.
Right.
So accounts go into negative balances. We do our best to collect them. Okay. We send out regular notices. It's one of the requirements that if they want to graduate, that they have to, they have to pay it up, and some just don't pay it.
Well, it goes to parents, by the way.
It could, it could be a student that left. It could be a student that left during the year. It could be a student who maybe was outplaced at one point. It could be any number of reasons why. There was a large balance for one student who's actually goes back to their junior year, and the parents said, just stop serving them. Don't cut them off. Don't. But they never paid it. Mm-hmm. And by law, we have to pay,
It
we have
stated
to,
that in
we
state
have to,
guidelines.
yeah, we have to make that, make up that difference. So we have to pay it.
Well, like I said, it's not, we all saw it, and it's not a huge amount, but I was just wondering how it becomes uncollectible, but I
Or
think
if they move it.
if they move, or, yeah,
We
there's
actually,
reasons. Okay.
today, the director came in and said, I just received a $98 check from a senior balance from last year. How do you want to handle it? So either I'm going to get it back at some point during the year. I told her for right now, hold it. We'll see if we get more. Either I'll get it back, or when it comes to the end of next year, we'll just offset what I owe her by the money that she was able to collect during the year. So they still keep trying to collect them. We still keep sending out the letters.
So I wanted to just give you two other pieces of information. I'll pass this out. But in the, this is the results of some of our summative assessment comparative results. But at Monday's last Monday's Board of Ed, or Tuesday's Board of Ed meeting, we actually accepted the resignation for the purposes of retirement of Dr. Ann Keene, our Associate Superintendent in charge of many of the curricular changes and improvements that we've made over the past several years. She's been with the district for 20 years, and she has been, actually was the interim superintendent for two different times, right? And
Including one
was-
during Hurricane Irene.
Yes, exactly, that's correct. And so she has been given great service to the town of Guilford, and we accepted her resignation with thanks. There was some dispute about whether we had the ability to not accept her resignation, but I think ultimately we decided that it was probably, with the 13th Amendment and all, it was probably a good idea to just go ahead and accept it. But related to that, we did get some results back over the summer from our Smarter Balanced Assessment. That this is the assessments in grades 3 through 8. You will note that on the second page of the document I just handed out, among K-12 districts in mathematics in the state of Connecticut, Guilford is 4th. That's grades 3 through 8 aggregated, behind New Canaan, Westport, and Darien. Region 18 is not a K-12 district. That is a 9-12 district. Or 7-12 district. In English language arts, over on the right-hand column, Guilford is 8th overall in the state, but again, 3 of the districts ahead of us are not K-12 districts. So among K-12 districts, we're behind only New Canaan, Westport, Darien, and Simsbury. So it's really good, honestly. I can't overstate this, and I don't want to understate it. These are outstanding results. These are results that if we were basically looking at our performance purely on demographic numbers, we would be in the mid-20s. That's where we are in the state of Connecticut on just purely socioeconomic factors. So it is the kinds of changes that Dr. Keene and Dr. Freeman and really the faculty have been implementing. I think you're seeing some pretty powerful results. The next page is just our reference group, comparable schools. Again, we're not, we're in English language arts. We're 3rd among our reference group. Amity is the 1st there, but again, that's not a K-12 district. So Simsbury is a K-12 district, and we're 2nd among K-12 districts. In math, and this is really, I think, reflective of the kind of work we've been doing on our math curriculum and the math materials. Math coaches. And obviously with the English language arts, also the literacy coaches. But first, among comparable schools in the state of Connecticut, in demographically similar schools, ahead of Trumbull, Amity, Avon, Glastonbury, and so forth. So this is really just outstanding, and it is evidence of really what we've been trying to accomplish here, and it is certainly bearing fruit. This was not always like this in Guilford. 10 years ago or 15 years ago, we were 40th in mathematics in 8th grade, and so this is something that we really ought to be very pleased with. The next page is, or the next 2 pages are SATs. language and mathematics. Again, a little bit different because you have to be careful. These are not K-12 districts like Fairfield. Ludlow is obviously just one high school in a larger town. And you see Fairfield Ward is down at the bottom, so you'd have to aggregate those. West Hartford Hall and West Hartford Conard, you'd have to aggregate those if you wanted to look at a town-wide basis. But we're going to try to get a little more data, I think, at our next meeting on the SATs in particular, and find out what is the growth level, what are the kinds of, and actually, very importantly, what's the participation rate? We have an extraordinarily high participation rate in Guilford on the SATs. It's like 99%, and that affects towns that have a lower participation rate tend to have a higher percentage of performance on the SAT in particular. Even though it's a state law, you're supposed to take it. Not all towns enforce that. We have a very, very high participation rate. So anyway, I just thought you'd like to know, the board would like to know that these are, I think these are results that we are extremely pleased with and reflects the budgetary support that we've received from the Board of Finance and also from the community. And we look forward to continuing it and moving higher.
Thank you for the good news. Thank you. Appreciate it. Anything else for the Board of Education? If not, do we hear a motion to accept the report of expenditures of the Board of Ed for August 2018 in the amount of $4,615,877.82?
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions or recusals? Okay. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Bill. Item 5, review and approve a report of expenditures for the town government for August 2018. Mary Jane. Good evening. We have a fairly big amount to approve tonight. Fairly large amount. So where should we get started? Should we expense revenues?
Starting at the top, expenditures come first.
Okay.
Not too much for me to report on the expenditures. One thing you will see will come up later on the agenda is the debt retirement principal is showing it over expended by $400,000. That was the budgeted premium that we are looking to apply to that expense that we just like you budgeted. So since we have paid all of our principal payments for debt, I'm going to be seeking that transfer tonight.
Right, that'll be later on.
So that's really skewing the numbers at the bottom. I don't know if anybody has any specific questions on any other expenditure line items.
I think Mr. Gammerman had one. I'm trying to find it. Well, it's the equipment repair and maintenance for Public Works, which is 96%. Shows 96% expended, but
it's
I would say
that's primarily all the purchase orders.
7/8 of it is encumbered. So
yes, they encumber most of the money at the beginning of the year for all the supplies that they need. For this month, it was like 20,000 or something.
the 96% grabs your attention, but it's encumbered. So.
Correct. It's all encumbrances. It's something you would see year after year.
I have a more general question.
Yep.
On the warrant page, there are a plethora of items, prior year encumbrances.
Mm-hmm.
If those, at the end of the year, that money is a surplus and it flows into the general fund,
Mm-hmm.
do those expenditures that take place now that are listed as prior year encumbrances, and I think it was across, I just noticed there were a lot of them, that will hit here in this year's budget, correct?
They're actually on in fund balance, so there's committed fund balances for all of the encumbrances. If you look at, I think I might have my audit. They fall off as if they've already been expended. and they show up in our fund balance.
Expended in the prior year then?
Prior year, yes.
But we don't account for it, but it
They're-
flows into
they're-
the surplus though.
Correct, and then they are set aside here, all of these
Oh, so
encumbrances.
instead of going into the undesignated
Fund,
fund surplus, it
they are
goes
set.
into the encumbered
Correct.
surplus fund?
So it's
Okay.
coming against
So-
all of this money
So these that
you
I see here are coming out of that?
Correct.
And so they're not hitting this percentage number for the year here?
Correct,
Okay.
exactly right.
Okay.
Anything else on expenses? We go on.
We'll skip medical, we'll do that.
We'll go back to that.
revenue.
We'll go to revenue.
We'll go
Yeah.
to revenue.
Okay.
The one comment I wanted to reiterate on the revenues is the note that I have at the bottom. The tax collector's office is short of a full-time employee, so not all of the batches, well, not all of the batches have been posted to Munis. However, every dollar is in the bank. It's just not reported here. She did give me an updated number. She did give me a number for the end of August, which would bring us about just shy of 50%, which is right about where we expect to be. So we're hoping to get caught up on those really quickly. So
another $8 or $9 million.
Yes, yes. I think the number was somewhere around 44 million, 43, 44 million that she gave me. So we're just waiting for it to come up to our office to be posted.
And all that money was due August 1st?
Correct.
So it was due July 1st, but you had a
Right,
grace
paid
period
by
until
August
August 1st.
Right.
And one thing I noticed, just again as a reminder, this will be going on all year for finance. We had a revenue of 80,000, but this was the budget that was approved. But when we set the mill rate, we anticipated 150,000. So, although it says 75% collected, we're expecting that 150. So we're probably more at the 1/3 or 40% or something like that. 40%, if that was our number. But that was just
Correct.
for basically
Based on the
for the mill
150, we're
rate,
at
not for the
40%.
budget. So.
Yes, that is, 150 is our goal, if it's not at least to the budget.
It's-
The mill
it's-
rate
it's a
was
goal that's
based
not in the
on-
budget.
Correct, the mill rate was based on that change.
Right.
Yes,
Okay.
although the budget had already been passed with the 80,000, correct.
Okay. Anything else on revenue?
I want to talk about interest a little bit more. So we can do it now or we can do it later, and I actually printed something out. Do you want to do it later under new business, or do you want to do it now?
Let's do it now.
Okay.
Let's do it now.
So
we're talking about expenses, revenue of the town. So,
Hey,
and we're
45
talking about
million,
interest,
so you just heard the revenue number should be 45 million for right now. So here's one for you. I think we should make $470,000 a year in interest, minimum. If you look at number 2, in the numbers, so I just took a flat year. I used expenses from last year. You'll see when you get it.
I'm going to take 2.
It's pretty self-explanatory. You start July with $45 million, which is, we just heard is what we have now. You pick up another $45 million by the end of January, and you pay it out. So you can see the expense column, and these are the exact numbers from 2018-19. This year is trending just a little bit higher, but so they're going to be off by $1 million or $2, but it's not going to affect the numbers materially at all. So you have the ending month balance in the third column. The average balance is just that. You divide it by 2, take the middle of the month. The rainy day fund and other monies, I said, are $10 million. They're actually more than that. And I believe the interest in the undesignated fund doesn't flow into this revenue number. That actually sits, the interest comes into, when I see revenue in here, if the rainy day fund earns interest, where does that interest show up? Does it show up in this finance number? Great, okay, I assumed it did, but if it doesn't, that's $170,000 using $10 million and a 1 3/4% interest rate, and rates are even higher than that right now. So you have your total investable income, you have your interest rate of 1 3/4 is what I use there, and to the right is the number we should be getting based on that. So for this past month, for example, I thought we should have had $62,000, and we got $36,000. So it just means that we have money that isn't working, or we don't have money. So I would argue that neither of either of those are not ideal. So, and if you, Matt, if you want to see a copy of this.
Yeah, I'd love a copy, but Mary Jane will give you a copy of cash on hand where it's sitting at the benchmarks that you just talked about. June 30th, July 1st, July 31st, and August 31st, show you what is exactly available to be invested in various investment vehicles. So if you want to take a look at that. I'm not sure you could do a straight line analysis and just divide by 2, because there are, as we've talked about before, we have operating cash flow issues we have to meet on a monthly basis.
And we also are all in these numbers, Matt. And you can move them all to the front of the month. And it's not
let me
gonna
finish.
change
Let me
the numbers
finish.
materially.
Let me finish. And we also have some obligations. We have money extended for which we are going to repay ourselves with the proceeds of the bonds that we just issued, $12 million worth of bonds and $3 million worth of anticipation notes. So that's money that's not available, which I don't think you have accommodated in your spreadsheet. Am I correct?
I think it perhaps.
Am I correct? Did you accommodate the money that we have out of our reserves that is now will be replenished by bond?
How long has it been
proceeds?
out?
Mary Jane? Months, in some cases.
When we go out to bond, we're actually replenishing funds we've spent out, in the prior
It
year.
should all work out in the wash at the end. If rates are constant the whole time, the numbers, it should all work out. So that's just an allocation of it's an opportunity cost, effectively, of the money. So you can take off, like I say, $10 million, you take it off, that's $175,000 a year, which still gets you to $300,000. So so the Webster control account, for example, we had $8 million, and you've cut it down to 4. That doesn't pay much interest, right? I'm guessing 30 basis points.
About that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the how much does the municipal investment reserve pay?
8 basis points.
How much?
0.8.
0.8.
Mm-hmm.
How much does Stiff pay?
They're at 1.99 today, I think. So 8 basis points for municipal revenue and 1.99 for Stiff.
And 30 basis points for the other. And so the municipal reserve, is that something that we have, is that the money you're referring to?
Well, you have to take into account that through Webster Bank, we have a series of reserves that we have to keep on hand in order to have all of our services paid for. It's common in most cities and towns, or all as far as I know. So we need to keep a minimum of close to $6 million in our accounts just to receive the services from Webster Bank.
Okay, so...
And we receive a net interest rate from that, but it's small.
Okay, so I would like to think we can do better with the $12 million on lines 1 and 2, but if you take the $30 million in the Stiff account, if you look at the ending balance, that's basically the money. If you just use the Stiff money and you pay your bills with that, you still end up with $300,000 in interest. And that's almost exactly what this sheet shows here. And so in essence, the rainy day and all the other monies, if we have to earn 0 on that, which again I don't necessarily agree with, and it certainly shouldn't be for a long period of time, but this $30 million should generate close to, well, there it is right there. It should generate close to $300,000.
How long is that $30 million available for to earn interest on? Because we're drawing down on that every month as we go through.
I have it in
fiscal
here.
year.
You can look at the sheet, Matt. It's
If
not rocket science.
you would send me a spreadsheet, that would be helpful. And by the way, Ken, thank you very much for taking the time to put the spreadsheet together. We've had this discussion at least a half a dozen times.
For a year. This is the first time I've seen this. It's nice.
We've had this discussion at least a half a dozen times in the public domain. We've also had it privately, and we have asked for you to prepare a schedule like this so we could understand exactly what you were saying.
No, I believe that.
Ken, and I am appreciative of the fact you've been able to do this. At one point, I reached out to you, I believe it was in December, and asked you if you would work with Mary Jane on developing those exact same schedules.
And I said
and
yes,
you said
and
no,
I
you
communicated.
would.
It's not my job, by the way. And I said yes, and I've done it, and I've asked for it,
Well-
I haven't gotten it. And frankly, I'm getting pushback, and I'm telling you we should earn more interest income.
Right, and I'm
that's-
thrilled.
And I get heat for it, I've been saying it for a year.
No, you're not getting heat.
Just put
I'm
the money in the
thrilled that
bank.
you have taken the time to give us the analysis that we asked for back in December. Thank you very much for doing that.
Fine. Anyway, we should be doing, we can do better, we should do better, and the 150 rates don't appear to be coming down anytime soon. So
Well,
our interest line should continue to do well.
I would echo the sentiments of Matt that I appreciate seeing this. It's definitely something to work towards.
Right.
And
I have just one comment.
Jonathan, go
I see this, and there has been a little bit of a debate over whether we can pull it off, and when money is tied up. And admittedly, the estimates that you're coming up with are never perfect. Obviously, Mary Jane's probably going to have the best tool kit to come up with the best estimates. But I do see here a real opportunity for the town. So wherever we can come together, and I think Ken's artifact here is really good because he's showing the potential for the tax revenue to earn interest. And obviously it's there. It's in excess of $80,000 what we budgeted for. We all agree on that. And I think this is really something to strive for. $300,000 of interest for the town.
I agree, Jonathan, and information is power. And we've just been supplied with some information that will help us make some decisions. And we'll go through that document and validate it to the best I can.
It's a good thing.
It's a good, as I said, it's a start. It's something I asked
Yep.
for last December.
And this is something you will be able to share, Ken. You'll be able to get this so that these numbers can be also played with. I mean, you plugged in last year's.
This is last year's numbers, it's going to be different, but not materially.
Right. But with the formulas and everything else that were part of that. Okay. Thank you.
It might just be helpful to take this and the best practices for most cities and towns our size and put it together to make sure that, I think it's got a lot of potential, but I just want to make sure we're also using best practices. And I know that there's for different cities, there's different sizes and there's different models. So I think this is a good start, and maybe Mary Jane, you can supply the best practices too for cities and towns comparable.
I want to bring in interest too.
Yeah,
It's
we
more than
all
just-
want to bring in interest. We all want to do it.
We're all in agreement there, I
And to
think.
Mary Jane's point,
Yeah.
prior to Mary Jane being here, the money was sitting in one
Yeah.
bank where it was not insured and not guaranteed, and I didn't realize TIF paid the rate that it does, or that the funds were as liquid as they are, and she's obviously moved a lot of it there, so it's protected, which it wasn't before, and it's earning a market
Yeah.
interest rate, which is good.
And we did it last year as well. That's why we were able to bring in, 100,000 more than budgeted last year. And if you look at it was actually, not 100,000, it was $100,000 more last year than the average of the prior 5 years. So, just making that one simple adjustment has moved us forward.
Well, gone are the days of making $800,000 on the interest
No.
income. So,
Yeah, I was going to say, there was a time.
so anything we can do, right?
I'm all for
So
bringing in more
all-
interest. There's no
all for
debate
it.
here.
We're all
No
for
debate.
bringing in more money.
In addition to the best practices, if you could also let us know what the minimum balances that we need to keep in these accounts are. I think you made reference to it with the,
Webster,
Correct.
6 million.
Webster, I actually spoke with them today just to confirm those numbers, to be sure that I was correct.
but there's similar minimums for the municipal investment reserve.
It's all combined. It's
Okay.
the $5 to $6 million is all Webster. So it's wherever we have money in Webster, all that money counts towards that $5 million. It doesn't necessarily have to be in one account or the other. Clearly, we keep the checking account at the lowest level because that's where we're getting the least amount of interest. But we put the money in there as needed. Whenever we cut checks or the Board of Ed cuts checks, the money has to go in there. So we're not overdrawing accounts. That's why it fluctuates so much. But we keep it at its bare minimum based on what we're paying out.
When you talk about the minimum, though, and I'm just just curious, Webster Control County, you're saying $5 to $6 million or $6 million, and it's at 4.3, August 30th, and current balance is 1.4. What? So
it's a combination of the two accounts.
It's a combination of the two accounts. Okay.
Yeah, the municipal investment reserve is also Webster. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Okay.
I'm sorry if that wasn't clear.
Yep.
The first two accounts are both through Webster.
Makes sense. Okay. Thank you.
So we
Mary
can
Jane.
take that 10 million away from Webster and put it in the STIF, or we can't?
We can take more. And again, that's just a snapshot of those days. So we're, Sandy and Sandy in my office, we're playing with those numbers every day, trying to make sure that we transfer everything out to STIF as we can. Again, with my discussions with the bank today, I did set an appointment for them to come in October, right after the auditors are done, so that we can look at some other options that we might have available to us.
So I assume we pay our bills through Webster?
Yes.
Mostly?
Mm-hmm.
Are we able to pay our bills out of the STIF account or no?
No.
But we can move money anytime
Correct.
we want?
Yes. That's why you'll see it went down. So, right, didn't it go
So
down?
Webster will be
until-
upset, I
Went down a
assume,
little
if
bit.
you
went
take
down.
all the money out and just bring it in so that you can
yeah,
write your check.
They're upset. They know I've been doing that over the past year, so.
And they won't, and they won't give you a better interest rate than 8 basis points?
Well, it's gone up to 8 basis
Oh,
points.
it's kind of though.
Yes. It did. It went
Okay.
up.
Is that part of your meeting? Are they like negotiating a better rate or?
They're always looking to try to get me a better rate, because like she spoke to me today,
Yeah.
she says, I know you're going to send all your money to STIF. So, so that's exactly what she
But that's
said to me.
that's not unusual.
Right.
A lot of municipalities do that.
Absolutely,
So,
absolutely. That's what it's forced.
yeah.
But they know.
Thank you, Mary Jane. Thank you, Ken. Shall we
This
go?
is good progress.
It is.
Yeah,
Shall-
that 10 million sitting there is $170,000 a year.
yeah. Shall we broach medical?
Shall we what?
Go to medical?
Oh, Broach Medical.
Broach Medical.
I said Broach Mat.
No.
I Broach Matted all day.
No.
It's okay.
We're going to medical. So medical was, yeah, I don't know, this was one of the highest months that we've had. Now, Mary Jane, what, I know you were going to look into this, or?
Yes, as soon as this number came in with the August claims at 1.5 million, I immediately sent some emails out to the people that manage our accounts. I have not heard back from them specifically to what it is, although they believe that it's a catch-up from the summer, some items that have changed, but I don't have a really good answer right now as to why the claims were so high in that 1 month. It was a real anomaly.
Yeah, it's, but historically, August is usually a pretty heavy month.
Well,
and
that's
it was
why
last. It was
they're thinking
the
it's,
highest one last year. So
carryover from some other things
Yeah.
and change in the plan year. But again,
400. Yes, 400,000.
I could only speculate at this point. I don't
Right.
have a final answer.
Okay. So we'll.
But there's precedent, because last year it spiked too. Not as much, but it did spike.
Right.
Correct,
It's a
and that's
yeah.
why I questioned it. I said,
Yeah.
100,000, even 200,000 swing is the norm for August. That was just
That's big.
higher than I liked to see.
Let's see. Warrants. Let's go in order. Special fund warrants. Question regarding the very top one there. Northern, this is one that I hadn't heard, the $190,000 for Northern Heights. Is that development?
Yes.
Correct. It is a development that the work, I don't know, Matt can probably talk to the actual work itself probably better than I can, but the work was not getting done through the developer, and there was a bond out on that account. The bond was transferred from Liberty Bank to the town of Guilford and was sitting here in a special account for us. And so we were waiting for the developer to make the improvements to the road and provide proof to us that it was done before we would release the funds to pay the subcontractors, to pay the developer back. So the 190 is actually the excess from the original bond minus the actual expenses of the construction. So once that was done, and it was done to our satisfaction, and we had proof that all the subs had been paid, we transferred that money back to the bank. So it was never our money.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And the improvements have been completed?
Absolutely, it's complete.
Yes, the engineering department has accepted the road improvements as acceptable.
Anything else on special fund?
The Audubon Society thing there. Did you ask about that already?
No.
Road construction, what is that?
The Audubon
The
Society
Audubon?
was a payment made as part of the settlement with DEP. It was part of the conversation.
Oh, that I missed?
Yeah, I can certainly fill you in at some point on it.
So, are we allowed to talk about this now?
Yes, because it's settled. That piece is settled. This relates
This
to work.
is separate from the other?
This is separate. This piece was settled as a result of DEP's decisions related to the Daniel Avenue restoration project post-hurricane, including the placement of additional placement of riprap in the stream leading
Where
up.
the culvert is there?
Yes. So this satisfies the fact that we had not taken out the appropriate permit applications for same.
So why are they willing to? This is with Deep, but
That's deep.
okay. So
DEP's
why are they willing to settle here on this one?
Because
Why have they
there's
on
a
the
sense
other
of urgency related to the crossing, the Daniels Avenue crossing for the water main project. And DEP would not release the other permits until they were satisfied with the remedies on the prior violation.
Okay, so these permits have been released, but the other permits have not then still?
No, the other permits, DEP has released all the permits related to the water main project.
No, I'm talking about the other violations that
There
are
are-
still pending.
it's-
with
it's
DEP.
my
We have
understanding-
we have after the fact permits in on the other violations, which DEP has still not ruled on.
But this one they have.
This one they
And that's
did,
why we can
owing
talk
to
about
the
it, 'cause-
owing to the urgency with the water main project.
Yeah, I guess my question is, it has to do with the magnitude of the number on this
Right.
one versus what you're talking about on the other ones.
Right.
And why they are,
That's the number DEP came up with. Again, we had a substantive discussion. I know you were unable to make that call because you were out of town, and can certainly fill you in. I think, did you get a copy
yeah,
of
no,
the summary?
I'm pretty aware of what's,
Okay.
pretty aware of what's going on. Okay. And my favorite's in there. I assume that number 3 line is for the inspection phase of it?
Correct. It is the inspection phase. Let me see if I brought those. I'm not sure if I brought those numbers. So we only have about, we have a small amount of retainage left on the contract itself. I want to say $22,000, give or take a little bit. Other than that, all of the construction money is out, and these are just the final inspections.
So for a
and
couple
all
more
that.
months, they're going to
You're gonna
walk
see the
by and say that it's
inspection,
still,
yeah.
the road's still there and we're going to pay $14,000?
Yeah, they have to make sure the grass grows and, yeah.
I was wondering if you were going to catch that one.
But the,
And I'm sure we talked about it before, but I looked at the printout you gave us, it might have been 2 meetings ago, that summarized the project. And I noticed that we were over the agreed contract amount for the contractor phase of it, not the HACS portion, but we paid more than the original contract. Was that
there
a
was
change
there
order or
was a
something
change
that went
order,
in?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I apologize, I thought I printed that out to bring with tonight. I don't seem to have it, but like I said, it was about 22.
Okay.
You know, the work itself is all done. We're just holding back a small amount of retainage at this point.
Okay.
The grant for the housing study that's being done, that we have for the affordable housing
Patrick Quinn?
Yeah, the almost $10,000. How much, the fees, the study was how much?
48.
48 or something, 15.
The contract.
I was just wondering how many more
Just a-
payments are left in it.
48.8. The contract itself was for 48.8.
Okay.
It's
Is it
80% complete.
80% complete?
Yeah, there's
Okay.
just shy of 10,000 left
Okay,
on the contract.
Okay.
After these two payments.
great.
And I believe they're having a readout on the 25th, was it? Sandy said this morning.
Yeah, Sandy just reported this morning about a meeting.
There was a meeting in August, right?
But there's another one Sandy Roth reported on this morning.
Okay. But they did present, Patrick Quinn
Presented.
presented their drawings and everything in August.
And there's, the following meeting is next Tuesday night.
Okay.
Okay, anything else on special fund?
No, I just found my note on Long Hill Road, it was 28,000. I was close. My memory was almost there, but not exactly quite, not exactly.
Anything on weekly warrants or the 77 pages of warrants?
I have a question on page 4.
Which one are you on? I'm sorry, Veronica, which one?
Weekly
Weekly.
warrants.
Weekly.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Yep.
Page 4, Field Turf USA it's a prior year encumbrance. Is this for the failed turf?
No,
Yeah.
that's a maintenance contract for the new high school. The one that's good.
The old field.
The old one.
The old field.
The old one.
Mr. Gammerman had a question on page 35 on the regular warrants, the big one. Yeah, 35. It was on American Leak detection for repair to broken water line, Parks and Rec. It was a repair and an inspection by a vendor, about $3,000. Just wondering what broke.
No, it's underground maintenance, and it says a water line. It must be
There was a
sprinkler or
water
something
leak
like
at the
that,
beach.
Oh, well, that might be it then.
Yeah,
There were,
Yeah, it doesn't say Jacobs or anything, but
No.
it is under Park and Rec, so,
yeah.
right.
okay.
I'm just guessing, but
That's a
that's what
matter
I
of
think
the- yeah.
I think that's
Logical.
what it is.
If you think Park and Rec, you think this building, that there was a line break, but
Correct.
could have been another property. Anything else? For expenditures, for town, for revenue, medical, warrants, anything? Okay. With that, do we hear a motion to approve the report of expenditures of the town for August 2018 in the amount of $10,138,870?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions, recusals? Okay. So I guess, Mary Jane, you'll be sticking around up here for these, right?
Yes, with a little help from my friends in the audience.
You got it. Item number 6. Consider and take possible action to authorize transfers from unassigned fund balance. I do want to make a very quick disclaimer note. I was a little bit confused when I read this, and I saw unassigned fund balance. Just for note, the first memo with the transfer for debt principal is not unassigned fund balance. Because
It
when I
should
saw
have just
that,
been fund
it should have
balance.
just been from fund balances, but this
Fund
memo was
balances in
added
general.
later
Right.
and just didn't get corrected. So, with that being said,
The first one should be pretty straightforward.
should be
because
straightforward.
this is-
We've already pretty much discussed it.
It was in your budget, so I don't know if you need me to say anything more.
No, usually I read the memos.
Go right ahead.
I'll do it anyway.
Right ahead.
So I want to hear myself talk.
Sure.
Right? So this was the memo from September 12th from Mary Jane. It's basically the fiscal year 19 debt retirement principal budget is overdue to budgeted use of premiums set aside in fund balance to offset this year's expense. At this time, all debt principal payments have been processed. Therefore, I am requesting that the following transfer be made to cover the overage, and that would be $400,000 to 00151-58662 reduction premium refunding from fund balance assigned to GHS financing. So this is just part of the process that we already agreed that we would go through in the budget.
Correct. Through the budgeting process, this is how
Right.
it was agreed upon.
As you said, straightforward. Does anybody have any questions or comments, concerns?
I'd just like to add
Otherwise-
that you have a
Go ahead.
similar budgeted item in the interest line, but until all of those payments are made, or once all of those payments are made, I will come back at that time.
Rather than read it all.
The
Oh, go ahead, John.
GHS financing has the surplus, right?
Yes, it does. That's where the surplus is.
So rather than read it all again, do I hear a motion to accept the recommendation as made by Mary Jane in the memo?
I'll move we approve the transfer.
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Next one. This one will be a little bit longer. Memo dated September 11, 2018, transfers from unassigned fund balance. This refers to last month and states last month I presented an analysis of the June 30th, 2018 unaudited estimated unassigned fund balance, bringing our percentage of operating revenues up to 10.5%. Our policy states that the boards will strive to, and I should say, quote, strive to accomplish unreserved, now called unassigned, fund balance of 5% to 10% of regular general fund operating revenues, unquote. Using the 2016 percentage of 9.1% as a baseline, since it is under 10%, I estimate a delta of approximately $1.3 million. This is the difference between the 6/30/18 unassigned fund balance at the estimated 10.5% and the baseline of 9.1%. Therefore, I respectfully request a transfer from unassigned fund balance into the following lines. Line 1, fund balance committed to technology, $150,000. Fund balance committed to transportation plan, $350,000. Fund balance committed to facilities task force, $50,000. Thank you for your consideration. So,
If I might, for a moment?
Sure, go ahead, Matt.
If you would all take a look at your the board pack under library, you will find the policy that was adopted by both the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance. Policy folder has fund balance policy, and you'll see that it was
I'm
first
sorry,
recommended-
Matt, let me interrupt 1 second. Library and then go where? I'm sorry.
policies.
Policies, yeah. And then fund balance policy?
Yep.
Thank you.
And you'll see that it was approved and recommended by the Board of Selectmen on August 2nd, 2010, and adopted by the Board of Finance on 9/20, September 20th of 2010, so 8 years ago. So Mike, you were pretty close to that number. And you'll see that the policy states maintain unreserved fund balance of 5 to 10% of regular general fund operating revenues, maintain adequate reserves to support at least 1 month of operating expenses, maintain adequate reserves available for special appropriation, which may result from unexpected expenditures or shortfall in revenue, and then to eliminate the reliance on fund balance for property tax relief until fund balance levels exceed the targeted range. So I think the discussions that we've had leading up to this point have been consistent, that we had anticipated being in a position, and I think during the budget season there was significant discussion and talk of using some of the undesignated, unassigned fund balance to offset expenditures of some form or another. Some of us have been steadfast, as is mentioned in the 4th bullet point, to not use those one-time revenue opportunities for continuing or operating revenues, annualized operating revenues, because once you use it, you don't have it for the following year. You need to make up that amount. So what you have in front of you today is a request that was approved this morning unanimously by the Board of Selectmen, and they are the three areas, and I'd like to take the opportunity to talk a little bit about them. The first is fund balance committed to technology. I've talked about this in the past. We have been woefully underfunding and investing in technology in this community, on the town side. We are currently running Microsoft Active Directory services on a version that was dated 2003. We are running our Exchange server, our mail server, on a 2007 version. In order to get to 2016, we will have to migrate to 2013 first and then to 2016. So we have woefully underinvested in technology. A few months ago, we lost a server, and that server basically managed our database. It took us 4 days to recover because we had to replicate from backup. All right, so Town Hall was rendered relatively ineffective in terms of access to information. We've also talked, I think I've talked about, and this board approved the expenditure of funds for the Bloom-Shapiro Technology and Operational Efficiency Study at Town Hall South, and that report is due on my desk by the end of this month, and I have no doubt that that will result in some additional suggestions related to investments in technology for the land use departments. We worked with Connecticut Computer Company in developing a blueprint to move us from current state to somewhat, current state being antiquated, to somewhat current in terms of technology, which would include layers of redundancy, switch, routing, database, and server redundancy, so we would be able to recover almost immediately in the event of a failure to one of those major components. So there's that engagement, which will take probably 3 months, 4 months to migrate. Basically, it's rebuilding our data center. Current cost estimates are about $160,000 between hardware, software, and professional services to get us to that point. We have currently $60,000 in the Technology Reserve Technology Fund, and we have about $50,000 in the current operating budget that we would want to apply to this. So if you take the 50 and the 60, there's 110. We're asking for 150. That gives us 260. If you net out the Connecticut Computer contract, which we're about to enter into, that will leave us with a balance of about $100,000 to implement and migrate per the recommendations of the Bloom-Shapiro study. So that's the first one. Questions, comments?
Comments would be if anybody understands the technology and
Jonathan
the needs
does.
of this. Jonathan would be one, and you would be another, being in the technology field.
I also understand it, just so you know.
All right, should I just give kudos to everybody while I'm at it? Everybody who's under a certain, no, I won't go there. But I remember numerous budget years that the information technology and the information systems, there would always be the department coming forward, to us for hardware and a number of expenditures, and like anything else when it comes to capital, it gets cut. And I just happen to look, what we have for budget, computer software 1,000, hardware 6,500. I mean, this is for the entire town that we're looking at. Town Board of Ed, obviously different, and I think any of us who run businesses and have any inkling about technology, I mean, this is, we know it's been woefully low for many years now. So we've been surviving on it, but at some point it's going to become a critical crash.
It
and
became
that's what it
critical
started to happen.
when we crashed.
And it started happening this year.
Yeah, the very next day after we were up and running, I tasked our IT person with coming up with a solution so that wouldn't happen again. And that's where we are.
Tony's been swimming against the stream, so to speak. Right.
Well, besides, it's just inefficient. I mean, it's not a good use
Agreed.
of
Right, and that's going to come out shortly in a report.
Right.
Right.
Do you have that's my question, do you have a sense at all? I mean, I know we haven't received the Bloom report, but do you have a sense from that report that what you're asking for is going to adequately address recommendations from Bloom?
I think it does, because it will get us seed money to get to get purchases. Over time, we're going to have to. There'll be software licenses associated with some of the applications that we anticipate having to migrate to, the permitting systems. And by the way, one of the systems we're looking at is VOC, which is our emergency management platform. But the fire department uses it for everything from work orders to repair orders to daily job assignments, because it has a workflow component in it that allows them to manage every aspect of their business. That's more than we're probably going to look for. VOC has a permitting module. So Bloom-Shapiro was analyzing whether or not, we should continue to invest professional services in adapting and modifying the Munis system from Tyler Technologies versus looking at implementing the VOC system. We have some in-house subject matter experts with VOC. We are virtually a development partner with them because Mike Shove at the fire department has been working with them on the development of their emergency platform for the past 4 years, I think it is, 3 or 4 years. And we are extended pretty significant discounts because of our role as a development partner.
As a development partner, do we get to retain the software, or does it become?
Oh, no, you never own it.
It's VOG's.
You own it, you own the software, but revisions and upgrades, et cetera, and you have to pay for the licenses on an annualized basis. And we're probably going to be, with VOC, we're probably going to be getting close to getting an enterprise-wide license as opposed to a 10 license seat. We already exceed the licenses that contractually we have through VOC because we're a development partner with them.
There are 3 things that I've already thought to use for VOG once we make it town-wide, which is just getting more licenses. The fire department already uses it to manage all of the maintenance of their fleet, so could our public works. They use it to manage their work orders. I want to do that with IT. So instead of phone calls coming in all day long to IT at Town Hall, work orders will go in. And the third thing that I'd like to explore is timesheet recording. They do all of their payroll through that as well. So if we can invest only by buying more licenses, we don't need to buy anything else from them. We can already tap into 3 things that's already being used by half the town. That can certainly be a benefit to the rest of us. So if nothing else, that would be the one thing I would be pushing.
What about integration for land use work? So
the permitting module is not written by VOG as yet. It's something that they are looking to do. So I'm not as sold on that aspect of it at this point. Somebody's really going to have to sell me on that. What we have in place with Munis does all the same things, so I am not looking yet to throw that away. But if nothing else, we need some more training and different type of usage of the system we currently have.
We also need an extensive exercise in process mapping, which basically is taking our current version of the way we do business and mapping it to the capacity in the system, the Munis permitting system. That piece, we bought the permitting module 5 or 6 years ago for one purpose, and that was so the finance office could get Munis reports out of the various land use departments on fees and fees alone. We did not implement the workflow processes associated with that module.
Workflow is the key. That's what we're really looking at there. I mean, starting from the town clerk's office, going through all the permitting, all the way down to notifying EDC that something's going on. It's been a very comprehensive study. There's very few people, I think, at Town Hall that weren't part of the study that this workflow will go through, and that's what I expect we will get from Bloom Shapiro, the need to implement that type of process.
Delivery on that?
It's supposed to be at the end of the month, by the end of the month. So.
Okay. We kind of.
You want to take these? You want to take these all 3 together, or one at a time? I can go into explaining.
Why don't you explain all of them, and then we can have a discussion.
The second one is Fund Balance Committee to the Transportation Plan. I think some of you have recall hearing that I've been intending to launch a Guilford Safe Streets Mobility Task Force, which is basically to take a look at the 2002 Transportation Plan, update it based on the changing conditions since the time that was drafted and accepted by the town, largely in response to changing priorities within the community. We went through an exhaustive set of discussions on the Shoreline Greenway Trail, the Nut Plains Pathway, The Board of Finance received 5 petitions for specific sidewalks in various areas of town. There have been concerns about general pedestrian safety, walkability, and biking safety. There have been comments and questions about speed enforcement throughout town, a need for potentially looking at some changes to some of the speed limits and/or the narrowing of roads to reduce speed. So the initial charge of this task force would be to look at all of the components of the original transportation plan, update them for today's priorities, and establish some plans. There are municipalities that have developed models, pedestrian safety models, throughout New England. That are in towns that are very much like ours. One of the challenges in this town is our road structure was designed and implemented in the 17th century. And many of these roads are still not much wider than they were when they were pulling carts with horses. And one of the challenges there is, particularly as the Nut Plains Pathway discussion came out, the viability of putting sidewalks in some places seems to be limited. The charge of this task force, for which I currently have 15 volunteers ready to go, of all walks of life and opinions. We have people who are in favor of the Shoreline Greenway Trail, people who are opposed to it, people who are in favor of the Nut Plains Pathway, people who are opposed to it, people who had no dog in that fight, who don't really care about those issues. So we've got folks who represent the pedestrian community. It's not the pedestrian, but the folks who live around town who fear for who have safety concerns about the walkability of downtown. We have, as I said, cyclists. We also have a representative from the police department on that. We have representative staffing from engineering, staffing from planning, staffing from environmental services, Kevin McGee. So the amount of 350 seems a little extreme. However, in the discussions with some folks who have been around this industry, this would give us the opportunity to hire a facilitator, as well as consulting engineering firms who have experience in these types of studies and programs and development of plans. But largely, the largest portion of that would be anticipated to be used for a demonstration project to complete some type of pathway or sidewalk. It is a commitment to doing something beyond just studying it. And I think that this throws some weight and some substance behind what we are attempting to do. And then the third one is fund balance committed to facilities task force. Gary McKelney is here tonight to support this because he made the mistake of saying, if you need me to help you with anything at some point, and we talked about facilities months ago, and we are at what I wouldn't call it a critical juncture, but I think every administration probably looks at this as critical. We have a drastic need to look at a town-wide facility study. We have a park and rec facility, a park and rec department that is looking for 6 bays to house vehicles and equipment that has to sit outside during the winter months, and inevitably they're repairing rubber gaskets and maintenance things. Maintenance costs are spiraling because of the impact of sitting outside in the winter months. We also have a Public Works staff that has their headquarters in one of the garage bays at Public Works. It's the largest garage bay on the back end. There's a small little office cut out for the foreman, but the table that the guys have their meetings at, maybe have their coffee in the morning and come in at lunchtime, is in the same bay that they paint picnic benches, they do welding, they do all these kind of things. Oh, and by the way, there's no restroom facility there either. So they have to go across the parking lot over to Public Works to get access to a facility. So we also have the old Public Works facility. We just purchased the 52 Church Street building. We have the need for substantial upgrades to the food pantry. At one point, Social Services were put in the building over at Adams on a temporary basis because we bought that property to expand parking at Adams, much needed parking at Adams. So, and then lastly, and this is something that nobody wants to talk about, but at some point we need to make a decision what we're going to do long term with the Public Works facility. That's in a floodplain. I received a notification from one of the federal agencies today about it's an opportunity for us to get some funding if we grant easements, conservation easements on town-owned property that falls within what they consider to be the floodplain. Well, guess what? Pages Lane is part of that, and part of Public Works is part of that as well. So at some point, we may need to take a look at whether or not the viability of Public Works in that facility is really going to be there long term. So this takes a look at all the facilities, all our needs. Oh, and I think I need to mention too, we have a paper records retention policy that we're running out of room to store some of this stuff. Now we can start to rent it from Iron Mountain, but if we can work within within the existing infrastructure, or identify where we can build new, perhaps a Butler building somewhere. One of the challenges is we don't have much storage space. The Park and Rec stores soccer goals, picnic benches, and a bunch of stuff on the back side of their garage bays between their facility and the railroad tracks. Eventually, there was supposed to be a truck wash bay that went through that facility. Once we implement that, because we need to do that, because we are under pressure from DEEP, like every municipality in the state, to clean the trucks in a facility where you capture the runoff, we're going to have to be in compliance at some point. So where it was originally designed to would run right through where Park and Rec stores a lot of their equipment. And the answer to the question that comes up is, well, why can't they store that stuff off at Bittner or somewhere else? Because it'll go south. It won't be there when they go to use it the next time around. So this is an effort, and Gary has graciously agreed to do this. He thought originally this was going to be, what do we do with 52 Church Street? But he has agreed to work towards putting a committee together, and I will work with him to do that. The $50,000 is a number that was provided to us by John Ireland. I don't know if there's anyone here who's familiar with John. John was in this business, facilities planning and maintenance. He had his own company, Sightlines, I believe it was, for quite some time, where he worked with major public and private universities on developing these kinds of plans. And he has suggested that the $50,000 should cover any expenses related to getting professional advice on that.
You gotta ask him.
Gary, yeah.
In fairness, that's a hip shot from John,
Yeah.
but,
Right.
and he said it could be less, but he,
Right.
I asked him to throw a number out that he thought was defensible, and that's the number that he came up with.
One thing I want to mention is what we are doing here is we are establishing new designated accounts. So while we are moving them out of unassigned fund balance, we are keeping them in the overall fund balance. So our total fund balance number, which is a number that the rating agencies look at as equally to what the unassigned is. So this will remain in those accounts until such time as they are drawn down or expended. And we won't spend any more than we need to out of these three line items. Questions on the following?
I'll just add on to that. I know what Mike's going to say. So just add on to that any use of these funds would have to come through the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance before they can be allocated. It's not as if $350,000 is going to be taken out and, given to a task force to use, however they want. You would have a say in whether or not or how the funds are spent.
And a bid process.
It would absolutely have to follow all of the town's procurement policies. Absolutely.
So, thank you for all that explanation.
Yeah, more than you want.
Didn't have to ask any questions. In my mind, there isn't, we've been talking about this now for actually going on a couple of years. We've been in a fortunate position to be able to say that we've built up the unassigned, but at the same time, we've been wondering, okay, so when we get to that point, that good day, where we hit a certain number, certain point, certain comfortability, at what point do we start using it appropriately for one-time expenses that are necessary for the town? I have no issue at all. Speaking on behalf of myself at this point, from being on the board for a number of years and watching it be where it was to where it is today, I have no issue at all with the use of these. these monies going from unassigned into these fund balances committed to technology, transportation, facilities. The only question I've always had is what's the right number that we finally do it. I will say that, there was a policy that I was a part of. That was, 5 to 10%. Ken made a very good comment before that there are communities, municipalities that look at their 12. They like it to be at 15. There's, what's that number that we're comfortable with? To me, I've always been in the mindset of 10. 10% for some reason now. People who know me well know I like round numbers. I don't like these little, 0.1s and all that other stuff. But that being said, whether it's 9.1 or 6.2 or 12.5 or whatever that number is, I think as a board, we have to determine, okay, number one, are we at that point that we take these numbers and move them over into allocated fund balances or funds? And is it for the right purposes? Now, that being said, the numbers that we're looking at right now, being $550,000 for these particular items, does not draw the 1.3. We're still at around. We're actually, if we,
I could spend 1.3 if you tell me to.
it could be done. But if we allocate just these numbers, we're still around that 10%.
That would be around 10.
It would be around 10.
I wasn't shooting really for a number. These were true numbers. That
And I don't think there should be a percentage number. It should be what the need is, and then we see where the comfortability factor is as a board. The Board of Selectmen has basically approved this unanimously to move forward, and now it comes to us. So is this the time, and are these the right uses? And in my opinion, based on these numbers and these particular line items, I have absolutely no issue with it. I think it is time, and I think these are exactly where we should be putting it. The one thing I would ask, though, or question is, you gave us some potential uses, and one that wasn't on here, and I don't know if you're still planning on it, or maybe this comes next year, depending on how unassigned is doing, and other considerations, revaluation. That didn't come up here.
That's true.
And I know that was one of those items that we really need to be considering that as well, because otherwise, again, all of these are issues that, even though they're one time revaluation, we're still needing to bring in tax money to be able to pay those things. The technology is no longer it'd be nice to have better technology. We have to have it. We need to have a transportation plan for the community, and we need to look at our facilities in an efficient manner. So I just wanted to state where I stood on this and open up to the board.
Mary Jane and I talked about that specific item, and we feel that it is appropriate to keep that in the operating budget on an annualized basis,
Okay.
and spread that out over a 5-year period.
Because
it's a recurring. It is in fact a recurring expenditure every 5 years.
And it was we're allocating
40,000.
It was 50. It was 50.
50,000, and
We'll have
so
to reassess
so the
that
discussion
with
was
a new
two-
estimate for 5 years from now. But
Right.
it's about.
So one of the numbers would have been 250,000 about that for if we did rebalance. Okay. Other comments?
If I may?
Yeah, go ahead, Jonathan.
So I actually have some serious issues with this proposal. We have discussed the undesignated fund balance quite a bit, and I am comfortable with a undesignated fund balance between 8 and 10%. I think it's sufficient for the town. And even just maybe 7 short months ago, when we had our budget hearings, I had presented a proposal to use some of the undesignated fund to shore up our pension funds and to provide tax relief. But there are two big differences between what I proposed then and what's being proposed now. One of them was that I see this fund as an amount that the taxpayer has been overtaxed. And what I was proposing was something that would provide tax relief for taxpayers. What's being proposed here is that surpluses from previous budgets are being used for additional spending. And here's another key issue that makes it different from when I proposed this during the budget hearings. Our decision today, the voter will not have any say in. The voter will not be able to put this decision to the referendum. So I feel like despite perhaps a need for a better technology program, that may be something we need to wait for, that's included in next year's budget and is properly vetted not only by the Board of Finance but by the voters. So for these reasons, I have great difficulty moving surpluses from previous budgets, which I consider to be amounts that our taxpayers have been overtaxed, towards new spending without them having any particular say in the process. So these are some of my reservations about the proposal that's on the table.
Jonathan, I can certainly understand your reservations. You are consistent with what you said during the budget season. Where I would differ from you is you got elected to make some decisions once in a while. I'm not sure that every decision needs to be made by the voters. You are in an elected position to use your judgment to vote and to expend and to make expenditures within the framework of the charter and state statute. Clearly, this falls within that capacity for this board to make that decision.
I concede to that point. It is within the charter.
Right.
Anyone else? What I will do.
I have some comments.
Oh, go ahead.
I
looked at you. I didn't see a reaction. So
No, I was surprised. This came up at the very end of last meeting, and it was a discussion point, and it has evolved rather rapidly to this stage. You pointed out revaluation. Matt, the items that I think you mentioned all of these. I don't think any of us threw in anything. The items that are on the sheet that was the result, we have the sheet that shows the fund balance going back. Revaluation, transportation plan, technology, other post-employment benefits, public safety, and future obligation of the town, consent orders. And I think you've touched on all of these with the exception of revaluation, which Mike just pointed out.